There comes a moment in a man's life when he realizes that the constant need to explain himself is not humility. It is fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being disliked, fear of standing alone in his convictions. We have all felt that subtle pull, the urge to justify our decisions, to soften our boundaries, to defend our silence, to clarify our ambition so that others do not misjudge it. But every explanation, when rooted in insecurity, chips away at something sacred within us. The world rewards noise, but it respects gravity. And gravity does not argue, it does not plead, it does not run behind approval. It simply is. When we begin to see this clearly, something shifts. We notice how much of our energy has been wasted managing other people's perceptions. We see how often we have betrayed our own judgment just to keep the peace. And we start to understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Be satisfied with even the smallest progress, and treat the outcome of it as something to be treasured." Progress in this case is the courage to stand without explanation. When we stop explaining ourselves, we are not becoming cold. We are becoming rooted. We are withdrawing our need for validation and reclaiming authority over our inner world. That is where real power lives, not in how convincingly we argue, but in how steadily we remain unmoved. This is not about silence for the sake of pride. It is about silence born of alignment. And that alignment must be cultivated deliberately. There are actions we must take, disciplines that reshape the way we think, speak, and carry ourselves. Each one is a reclaiming. Each one is a return to sovereignty. And together they form a path toward a life that no longer bends under the weight of unnecessary justification. 1. We separate what is ours from what is not. The first shift is radical in its simplicity. We distinguish what is within our control from what is not. Our judgments, our choices, our actions, these belong to us. The opinions, interpretations, and reactions of others do not. Yet how often do we confuse the two? How often do we exhaust ourselves trying to control the narrative in someone else's mind? Epictetus warned us clearly, some things are up to us, and some things are not. When we explain ourselves excessively, we are usually trying to control what is not up to us. We are attempting to manage someone else's perception, but perception is theirs. It belongs to their history, their biases, their wounds. We cannot invade that territory, no matter how articulate we are. When we internalize this distinction, a heavy burden falls from our shoulders. We no longer feel responsible for every misunderstanding. We no longer scramble to fix distorted impressions. Instead, we anchor ourselves in our own intention. Did we act with integrity? Did we choose with reason? If the answer is yes, the rest is wind. This does not mean we become indifferent to truth. It means we refuse to chase control where it cannot be obtained. We accept that being misunderstood is part of being human, and in that acceptance, we gain a new kind of stability. Each morning, we remind ourselves, my character is my responsibility. Their opinion is not. This single clarity reduces the impulse to explain by half. We begin to conserve our energy for what truly belongs to us, our conduct. 2. We confront the fear, beneath the need to justify. The need to explain ourselves is rarely about logic. It is about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of isolation, fear of losing status or affection. If we are honest, we recognize that many of our explanations are not calm clarifications. They are attempts to soothe anxiety. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How much of our explaining is an attempt to preempt a rejection that may never come? We imagine being dismissed, and so we rush to defend ourselves before the verdict is even spoken. To reclaim our power, we must sit with that fear instead of reacting to it. We must feel the discomfort of not being understood and resist the urge to immediately correct it. This is a discipline. It requires us to tolerate tension without dissolving into defense. When someone questions our decision, and we feel that surge of urgency to justify ourselves, that is our training ground. We breathe. We observe. We ask, is this explanation necessary for truth, or am I seeking comfort? Often, the honest answer humbles us. By confronting the fear directly, we discover that it loses strength. We realize that rejection does not destroy us. Misunderstanding does not erase our worth. And gradually, the compulsion to explain begins to weaken. We stand a little taller, a little quieter. 3. We let our actions speak longer than our words. There is a quiet authority in consistent action. Words invite debate. Actions, sustained over time, dissolve doubt. When we stop explaining ourselves, we give our behavior the space to reveal our intentions. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This is the heart of it. The more we explain our principles, the more we risk substituting speech for substance. The more we live them, the less we need to speak at all. If we commit to discipline, let our routine prove it. If we commit to growth, let our transformation demonstrate it. If we commit to integrity, let our choices reflect it. Over time, patterns silence criticism far more effectively than arguments ever could. This requires patience. In the short term, silence may be misinterpreted. In the short term, people may fill the gaps with assumptions. But if we remain steady, if we refuse to react impulsively, the truth of our character becomes undeniable. When our actions align with our values, explanation becomes redundant. We are no longer trying to persuade, we are embodying. And embodiment is power. 4. We practice measured speech instead of reactive speech. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the refusal to speak from impulse. When we do speak, our words must be deliberate, restrained, and necessary. Otherwise, they drain us. Epictetus advised, "Be mostly silent, or speak merely what is necessary, and in few words." This is not about suppression, it is about discipline. The tongue is often the servant of ego. It leaps to defend, to clarify, to prove. But disciplined speech serves reason, not insecurity. When challenged, we learn to respond slowly. We allow a pause. We choose clarity over volume. Sometimes the most powerful reply is a simple, composed acknowledgement. Sometimes it is no reply at all. This measured speech cultivates inner order. We begin to feel less scattered, less entangled in every passing opinion. Our conversations become intentional rather than reactive. And because we speak less, our words carry more weight. The world may continue to talk. Let it. We will speak when it serves virtue, not when it serves ego. That is the difference. 5. We anchor our worth in character, not approval. At the core of excessive explanation lies misplaced worth. If our value depends on being understood, then misunderstanding feels like annihilation. But if our value rests in our character, then misunderstanding becomes tolerable. We must ask ourselves, where does our dignity come from? From applause, from agreement, or from alignment with what is right? If it is the latter, then no external confusion can strip it away. Seneca reminded us that the wise person is content with himself. This contentment is not arrogance, it is self-trust. It is the quiet knowledge that we are striving toward virtue, even when others do not see it. Each day we return to our principles, we review our actions, we correct what was flawed, we strengthen what was weak. This internal audit matters more than any external commentary. When we know we are acting with integrity, we no longer crave reassurance. And so we stand, less defensive, less reactive, less desperate to be understood. Not because we are indifferent, but because we are anchored. When we stop explaining ourselves, we are not withdrawing from the world. We are withdrawing our dependence on its approval. In that withdrawal, we find something formidable: composure, stability, authority over self. We reclaim our energy, we reclaim our focus, and ultimately, we reclaim our power.